Leaked audio, not meant for the public archive. Edgar Cayce, allegedly, 1938. Soul contract transmission. You didn't choose your life randomly. You agreed to the pain. You chose the body. And the people who would break you were the ones you loved the most in the world before this life. This file was discovered in an archive that officially doesn't exist. The original reel was listed as destroyed. And yet, the voice print and transcript match hundreds of verified recordings of Edgar Cayce made before his death. But on this one, he doesn't speak as a medium. He speaks as someone who's already been to the other side. The soul forgets by choice. But the forgetting is not the tragedy. The tragedy is when we begin to believe we are only this body, only this pain. This video has already been taken down from YouTube. They called it dangerous because it contains something some believe breaks the ultimate agreement. Silence. Silence about the contract you signed before this life. Silence about the family you chose. Silence about the parts of yourself you now despise, that were all agreed upon before birth. Some say it's mysticism. Some say it's a hoax. But until you hear what Cayce tried to share, you'll never stop asking yourself one terrifying question. If this is true, why did I choose this life? When he first spoke of it, people listened in awe. But the deeper he went into soul contracts, the more his lectures disappeared. His texts were rewritten. The church condemned him as an occultist. The scientific community dismissed him as a dreamer without evidence. And yet, thousands came to ask why they suffer, why life holds on and won't let go, why they still feel like strangers in their own bodies. Before birth, the soul meets with other souls. They agree on lessons, they agree on time, they agree on pain. This transcript was thought to be lost, but it holds everything we were never meant to hear. Because if it's true, you can't be controlled by guilt anymore. You can't be forced to live someone else's life. You'll know none of it was random, and that's when you'll start to remember. But pause for a moment. Are you sure you're ready? Ready to find out what your soul signed before you became you? If yes, this won't just be a video. It will be a remembering. And as Cayce once said, you will not remember everything, but the moment you hear it, your soul will begin to tremble, and you'll know this is not new. This is a reconstruction from fragments, from tapes never meant to be released, from what was left in an archive no one was supposed to find. This is the soul contract. This is what you forgot. And maybe you forgot it so you could remember it right now. This message from Edgar Cayce was never meant for the public, not because he feared ridicule. He endured that his entire life, but because, in his own words, humanity wasn't ready for this truth. The truth that your life wasn't random. It was a contract, and you signed it. The soul chooses everything: the body, the family, the country, even the tragedies. All of it is agreed upon before birth, Cayce once said during one of his most private sessions. For years, this transcript was hidden because of one phrase that was later cut from the official record. Some souls choose suffering to awaken, but most never wake up at all. Ace's words sounded like an accusation, but he wasn't condemning. He was warning. In this session, he allegedly described, for the first time, the soul contract, a secret agreement made before birth, a document that doesn't exist in the physical world, but shapes who you become, what you endure, and who will break you. In his readings, Cayce spoke of a realm the soul enters before incarnation, a place he called the Hall of Choices, or the astral library of causality. There is no time there, no emotion, only knowing and choice. Each soul is shown several life paths. Cayce claimed he saw souls choosing between easy lives and difficult ones. But something strange happened. Almost all of them chose the harder path. Because at the soul level, pain doesn't frighten. It purifies. One documented case from Cayce's practice. A woman who had suffered 3 miscarriages and the collapse of her marriage asked, "Why is this happening to me?" Cayce entered trance and replied, "You chose this experience before birth, to forgive, to not retaliate, to learn not to fear loss." She wept, and Cayce said something that today might be labeled psychologically dangerous. You promised yourself you'd go through this, and if you refuse, your soul will choose this lesson again, in another life, again and again. Why is this considered so dangerous? Because if what Cayce said is true, then your pain is not an accident and not a punishment. It's a choice. This shatters the traditional worldview. It makes the individual responsible, not in a moral sense, but an energetic one. You chose your parents. You chose your abuser. You chose your illness. Cayce said, "Man is not a victim. He is the author. He simply forgot." But the most terrifying part? Not that the soul chooses suffering, but that at the moment of birth, it forgets. That is part of the agreement, amnesia. Without it, there would be no meaning in learning. Cayce compared it to a stage play. You walk onto the stage with no script. Your ego is the mask, and behind the curtain, you, the true self, watch through the veil of sleep. In one of his restricted readings, Cayce spoke of a soul that refused to incarnate. It saw the chosen path and said no, but it was sent anyway, because, quote, "This was the final chance. If the soul refused again, it would dissolve, break into energy, lose identity." This passage was removed from all official publications. It survived only in personal letters found after Cayce's death. Researchers believe this was the material deemed too dangerous because it forces us to rethink everything. What is responsibility? What is pain? What is free will? Cayce said, "True freedom is not in choosing, but in realizing you already chose everything." Time when the soul enters the body, it already knows what it must go through, but the body doesn't know. The mind doesn't know. And the task is to remember. And as Edgar Cayce, redacted transcript of reading 3024b. This fragment was sealed in the archives under a single label, not for publication. Because here, Cayce revealed the most dangerous truth he ever approached, a truth he uncovered near the end of his life. Every soul arrives with a mission, with a code, with an assignment. But if the soul does not awaken, the code remains dormant. Amnesia is not punishment, it is a filter. Only a strong soul remembers why it came. And this is where the most disturbing part begins. Because according to Cayce, most people never remember. Cayce described the structure of the soul's awakening as follows: the emotional trigger. A soul cracks through during a moment of emotional crisis. The death of a loved one, betrayal, a serious illness. The inner rebellion. A voice inside rises. I wasn't born for this. This is not my life. The contact. Through a dream, a meditation, or a sudden encounter with a teacher, the soul sends a clue, not in words, but as a deep feeling, the choice to remember or to forget again. Most people are afraid because truth demands sacrifice. It destroys the old self. Cayce shared a story from his private practice. A man who had lost his child came to him in despair. He no longer believed in God or destiny. In trance, Cayce said, "You promised your daughter you would give her the experience of love, even if only for a short time. And you promised yourself not to fall into hatred. Are you keeping that promise?" The man broke down. He screamed. He left. But 3 months later, he returned and said, "Now I understand. She was my teacher, and I was her exam." In Cayce's forbidden transcripts, he also wrote, At death, the soul undergoes a review, not of morality, but of one simple question. Did you do what you came to do? And if the answer is no, you are sent back. But the conditions will be harder, because you already had your chance. In one of his most chilling revelations, Cayce claimed, "Some souls come without the right to return. This is their final attempt. If they fail to awaken, they will be dismantled, erased. Not hell, but energetic death. Not suffering, but eternal forgetting." Decades later, in the 1980s, several regression therapists, unaware of Cayce's readings, reported identical imagery from patients under hypnosis. A bright hall filled with books of life, soul, contracts with other beings, missions interrupted in past lives, a bodily fear of remembering. This overlap became one of the strongest arguments for the authenticity of Cayce's lost words. So why was this information buried? Dr. Raymond Purcell, a Cayce archive researcher, once said in an unreleased interview, "If you tell someone they chose their trauma, their cancer, their poverty, you might break them. But if they realize it on their own, you awaken them." That, according to Purcell, is why this part of the transcripts was banned. Because it requires maturity, inner strength, and the willingness to stop blaming fate. In the final lines of this reading, Cayce said, "You do not save your soul. You remember it. And in doing so, you awaken others." He believed one awakened soul could affect thousands, not with words, but with the frequency it emits. An awakened person does not speak. They resonate. This reading is not just about the soul's mission. It is a challenge to every soul watching. Do you remember why you came? Or will you choose to forget again? If you knew what was waiting for you there, you would stop fearing death, but you would start fearing life. Edgar Cayce reading 3971A, unpublished. This is not an allegory. It is a direct quote from a transcript Cayce dictated to his son 3 days after waking from a coma. He had just returned, not from sleep, but from the other side. He said he emerged, not as a spirit, but as pure vibration of consciousness. There is no tunnel, no body, only sound, a calling, and you move toward it, not with your feet, but with intention. You don't move, you remember. According to Cayce, there is no time there, no past. You're all at once, every life, every failure, every mask, every victory. You don't just see yourself, you become it, and it is unbearable. Because there is no lie. And this is where the words begin, the ones the church would never allow to be published. Because Cayce wasn't describing heaven or hell, but frequencies of reality, layers, the soul resonates with after death. Everyone has their own layer, their own vibration. You die, and find yourself among those whose frequency matches yours. Not because of sin, but because of resonance. If you lived in fear, judgment, apathy, you will be surrounded by the same. If you learn to love, to forgive, to seek, your frequency will rise, and you will meet others like you. He describes 7 layers of post-death experience. None are reward or punishment. They are reflections of internal state. The fog layer, souls who don't realize they've died, lost in memory loops. The fear layer, those who lived in hate, still clinging to power, wealth, control. The regret layer, souls who understand but cannot forgive themselves. The observer layer, a transitional space. The soul watches its life without emotion. The layer of love, not an emotion, but full surrender to truth and reality. The layer of service, those who choose to return to help others awaken. The source layer. Cayce spoke of it in whispers. You do not go there to exist. You go there to disappear. When asked, how can you tell what layer you're on while still alive? Cayce answered, "Look at who you attract, what you tolerate, and what you call yourself. That is your frequency." In his Lost Notes, Cayce described one of the most disturbing visions. "I saw souls that were stuck, not because something held them, but because they believed they didn't deserve to leave." He called it post-death self-condemnation and claimed it was stronger than any outer judgment. The worst thing is not hell. It's standing next to the door of light and not opening it because you didn't forgive yourself. And Cayce also said that the soul sometimes has a choice to return or to stay, but not always. If you didn't complete the task, you won't return by choice. You'll be sent back, rushed, in pain, and you'll call it a random birth. He added, "Children born in crisis, war, or trauma are often old souls who delayed awakening and were denied the choice." The most shocking line of that transcript was this: "If you saw how many souls are afraid to go into the light, you would understand. The real fear is not death. The real fear is becoming who you truly are." Cayce ended the session with these words: "I saw my real face and realized I'd spent my whole life hiding it behind the mask of Edgar Cayce. But on the other side, there are no names. There is only you. When I came back, I understood. Every fear, every delay, every not yet was just postponing the meeting with myself. I don't know how much time I have left here, but if even one person remembers who they are, then I've fulfilled my task." This act is not a revelation. It is a warning. Cayce wasn't simply sharing a vision. He knew this message might never be released, that it might be too early, too deep, too real, but now you've heard it. You are not an accident. You are a contract, and you're not alone. Edgar Cayce. Final reading before his stroke, unpublished. He knew he wouldn't have time to say it all. He felt himself leaving. In the last writings his wife discovered, tucked between the pages of his Bible, there was only a single sheet of paper. On it, written in pencil, hand trembling, Cayce had scrawled, "If you're reading this, it means you've already awakened. It means it's time to remember who you are." According to researchers, this message was never meant for everyone. Only for those who could hear through the noise. For those who feel that life is not just work, survival, and the fear of death. In that letter, Cayce wrote, "There is no death, only a change of dimension. But not everyone crosses over. Some get stuck between, and they call it depression, insomnia, anxiety." He claimed, "If you feel like you can't fully be present in your life, it's not a disorder. It's an echo, a trace of where you were before they sent you back." Cayce warned that humanity is entering a time when the veil between worlds will grow thin. That during this period, some who have lived before will begin to remember, and some of them will choose to stay silent, while others will speak. Which are you? Cayce never wanted us to fear death. He wanted us to stop sleeping through life. You're not a body, not a name, not a job. You are a fragment of the source, sent into form. And if you forget this, you will be awakened. Through pain, through love, through loss. But you will awaken. Why was this never shared? Because if you don't fear death, you can't be controlled. If you know the soul is eternal, you stop living for approval. If you remember why you came, you don't bow to the system. That's why these writings were never published. They were hidden. Until now. But Cayce left one last warning in that final reading. It was addressed to those already awakening. When you begin to remember, you will feel alone. When you see how others live, you will feel anger. But don't let those feelings pull you from your path. You did not come to judge, you came to ignite. So now the question is for you. Not for your mind, but for your soul. Did you really think you found this video by accident? Do you really believe your interest in this is just a curiosity? Or are you starting to remember? If this message resonates, don't ignore it. You don't have to believe Cayce, but if something inside you stirs, that is not the voice of fear. That is the voice of a soul, remembering. Remember, you are not the first to awaken. You are not alone on this path. And what seems lost is only waiting for you to see it. This video could have been deleted. It could have been buried. It could have been forgotten, but it found you. And now the choice is yours.